It is schedule release time in the NBA, and your San Antonio Spurs are all over opening week. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Spurs, your daily San Antonio Spurs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to Locked On Spurs. My name is Matthew Tynan. Thank you, as always, for making us a part of your day. And thank you for your patience. I did make a post last night on the YouTube channel letting folks know that there wouldn't be a show yesterday. There were technical difficulties that persisted well into the night, and at about 10 p.m., I decided to call it just simply because I couldn't physically fight the internet, although I probably would have lost that too. But thankfully, everything is cleared up this morning, just in time for some schedule release stuff. This is finally the time of year where we start to get the little dribbles of content, where the next season, in this case, the 2026-27 season, is finally in sight. We get a little bit of taste of what it's going to look like. We will be getting to that here in just a second. We will also be getting to some odds and ends. The Spurs, or I should say Mitch Johnson and Brian Wright, were on Hard Knocks. I'm also going to remember Don Nelson for a segment. He passed away on Sunday at 86, and he played, while he was never a coach in San Antonio, he will sort of inextricably be linked to the Spurs for some very important reasons, and I'll get into that in the second segment. But first, it is schedule release time. And without further ado, this morning, this being Tuesday morning, Shams Charania of ESPN reported, because who else is going to report on this stuff? It's just always going to be Shams Charania. Reported opening week will consist of, actually, the Spurs will be featured twice on opening week. One of which, to me at least, is a surprise. Not necessarily because of who they play, but where they're playing it. But opening night in the NBA, the San Antonio Spurs will welcome the Oklahoma City Thunder to San Antonio, to the Frost Bank Center for the a rematch of the Western Conference Finals of last season. That will be the nightcap on NBC, October 20th, Tuesday, October 20th, 8:30 p.m. Central Time on NBC and Peacock. That will be following a 2 p.m. tip between the Celtics and Pistons. I'm guessing they're welcoming in the international crowd for that game. And then, of course, the defending champion, New York Knicks, playing host to the 76ers at 6 p.m. The LeBron James-led Philadelphia 76ers, the Jaylen Brown-led Philadelphia 76ers. Who knows if Joel Embiid will be playing in that game, but that is neither here nor there. Okay, like I said, San Antonio will be featured twice on opening week, or in opening week in the NBA. Second game, Friday, October 23rd. Again, not a surprise who they're playing, but a surprise where they're playing. Friday, October 23rd on Prime Video, Houston Rockets heading away from Houston, but not up I-10 or over, westbound on I-10 to San Antonio, but like, I guess maybe would they fly to Austin because that's where they're going? Would they take a long bus trip to Austin because that's where they're going? The Spurs and the Rockets will play at Moody Center on Friday, October 23rd, by far the earliest game that we've seen at any point of the I-35 series by a long shot. Previously, it had been in February, even March, like the very end of the season. This is the second game of the season against the Houston Rockets. Cool, I guess, on one hand, for sure. For folks in Austin, I'm sure they're going to love that. I'm guessing, I don't know. Y'all let me know in the comments, by the way. I have a hard time gauging this stuff sometimes, but I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that the second game of the season against the Houston Rockets, like a major rival, a bitter rival, the Houston Rockets, instead of playing them at home in your building in front of fans in San Antonio, that game will be played in Austin. I have not checked for any feedback on that. I'm guessing that there will be at minimum split opinions on the topic. Because I'm just going to guess that there are going to be some people who are none too pleased with that situation. Don't know. In the past, the games in Austin have been played back to back essentially. We don't know what that looks like yet. The full schedule will not be released until Thursday, so I guess we will find that out. By the way, the NBA will be sort of trickling out a few more sort of marquee matchups tomorrow on Wednesday. I think, and also some additional Prime games or games played on Amazon Prime. So again, this is the content faucet. It's been turned on, starting to drip a little bit, giving you a little bit of something that you've been starving for, that you've been thirsty for, trying to get everybody ready to go for the 2026-27 season. Okay, the other big news on the schedule, of course, I think where maybe we didn't see Houston and San Antonio in Austin coming, I think we kind of all saw Spurs at Knicks Christmas Day. I kind of think we all saw that one coming. And frankly, I wouldn't want it any other way. That is an incredibly fun game. Obviously, the Knicks, for the most part, I don't know if it was just something like a Mandela effect sort of thing where it felt like it was just every single year that the Knicks played on Christmas Day at noon all the time, every single season. That isn't the case, but they do play there a lot. Like that, New York Knicks, 11 a.m. Central, noon Eastern. That has kind of become their slot on Christmas Day, and it's a very fun game. We all remember 2 seasons ago, by the way, this is 3 consecutive Christmas Day games for the Spurs, the Victor Wembanyama effect. Having said that, not a one of them has been at home. And you know what, frankly? I think I'm okay with that, because I would probably feel the responsibility to be at the Christmas Day game. If it were in San Antonio, I'm sure that's something I will have to wrestle with in the future. But for now, Spurs Knicks in the Garden on Christmas, you love it. I think that you could argue that Victor Wembanyama's performance in the Garden 2 Christmases ago was kind of like his big coming out party. Like, not saying that he hadn't already made his mark, had some big games, but like being on that stage in the Garden, going for 40 plus, I forget exactly how many he scored, but like that just felt to me like, okay, this guy's here. And yeah, that has a lot to do with the fact that he's in the Garden. The Knicks get a ton of eyeballs. I think that's sort of when some of the animosities started to flare up. There were a bunch of, overrated chants for Victor Wembanyama, this, at the time, a 20-year-old, I think, in the NBA, in Madison Square Garden, getting just tortured by those fans who continued to torture him for all the way through this summer, and probably will continue to torture him. They were mad that he was on the cover of NBA 2K and not Jalen Brunson, which is crazy to me. Didn't even think that was a thing. Didn't even think that was remotely a possibility. Anyway, look, love it. It's a sign that the season is ahead. About a training camp start in about a month and a half. Good stuff. It's going to fly by, at least I hope. Because we need basketball here in a big way, that's for sure. All right, I'm going to tone it down a little bit for the next segment. And remember Don Nelson, who, as I said at the top, has a pretty important link to one of the sorry, not one of, the most important era in Spurs basketball history. Locked On Spurs is brought to you by Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focused on growing the business instead of managing software. The best organizations know that success isn't just about talent, it's about having everyone working toward the same goal. And that's true in sports, just like it is in business. I think the Spurs could have looked at an opportunity, as there was a lot of chaos this summer around the NBA, to join in on the pursuit of guys who were clearly for sale, shoveling out assets to bring in high-priced pieces, maybe surge their way all the way to the top of the title odds. But they've stayed the course, kept their powder dry, added to the roster rather than taking away or changing a bunch of parts. You can tell this was not they haven't reacted or overreacted. The organization has a vision, is sticking to it, and now you're seeing the results because everyone is working together from the same playbook. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That's odoo.com/lockedon. Alrighty, welcome back. And for those of you who are new here, or those of you who are just enjoying the show, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing with other people who you think might like the show. All the stuff that helps us out a lot. We appreciate all the support we've gotten over the whatever it's been, like almost 5 months now that we've taken over the title pod here at Locked On Spurs. We appreciate all of you and look forward to what's next. Big year ahead. I wanted to take a minute to remember Don Nelson, who passed away peacefully on Sunday at the age of 86. While he never coached in San Antonio, he will be inextricably linked to the Spurs for a long time, as long as anybody's got the memory of him remaining in their noggin. And I say that, and we'll get to that part in a second, and why there is such a connection between Don Nelson and the Spurs. But I first wanted to just sort of talk about a guy who was one of the most innovative, if not unconventional, coaches in NBA history, and one of its most colorful characters, certainly, along the way. But he was one of the early adopters of sort of the international style, of the international game. He was a practitioner of the positionless basketball that you see today all across the NBA, not just the whole positionless idea, positionless concept, but also the idea of a point forward, the LeBron James types, your big wing is initiating offense, something outside of the standard. It's got to be your John Stockton or your Mark Jackson types initiating offense. That's not really the way Nelly ball, as it was called, was played. You remember the We Believe Warriors, the 2006, 2007, I believe, somewhere in there. These lineups that had Baron Davis, Monte Ellis, Jason Richardson, Matt Barnes, Steven Jackson. It was completely unconventional to the point that that team became the first 8 seed to upset a number 1 seed. At the time, that number 1 seed was the Dallas Mavericks. What's the irony in that? Well, I brought up the fact that he was one of the first adopters of the sort of international style of play and utilizing bigs in a different way. Well, if it weren't for Don Nelson, who knows what we would have gotten out of Dirk Nowitzki. He was the guy who drafted Dirk and allowed him to play and kind of forced him to play the style of basketball that made Dirk who he was and, who he is now as a Hall of Famer in the NBA. Don Nelson was revolutionary in the way he coached, in the way he saw the game. And his teams were always wildly entertaining. He never really reached the pinnacle, but keep in mind, it was his record that Greg Popovich broke. His all-time, the most wins in NBA history. It was Don Nelson's record that Greg Popovich broke. Which is appropriate because, as I mentioned, Don Nelson will always be linked to Spurs history, and here's why. In 1992, Greg Popovich was fired. Larry Brown was fired along with his whole staff, which included Greg Popovich, which included R.C. Buford, by Red McCombs, who owned the team at the time. Don Nelson, and I know a lot of you know this, but I know a lot of you probably don't. Don Nelson hired Greg Popovich to be his assistant immediately in Golden State. And from there, Greg Popovich in 1994 came back to San Antonio after Peter Holt had purchased the team to become the general manager. Without that safety net or that release, that pressure valve, whatever you want to call it, that opening that Don Nelson immediately provided Pop, who knows how the dominoes would have fallen along the way. Who knows if Pop would have ended up back in San Antonio as the GM and then eventually, famously, the head coach just ahead of the Tim Duncan draft. Who knows how all that would have gone. But I do think it's safe to say that whatever the role was, however it played out, Greg Popovich, for as long as he was a coach, and I'm sure if you went and talked to him today about Don Nelson, he'd be telling you the same. That guy was his mentor. That guy was a critical element of everything that Greg Popovich became, and thusly, everything the Spurs became. Like I said, there is a really good chance that, there's a chance that if he's never hired in Golden State, straight out of San Antonio, gotten the experience in that position, he may never have come back to San Antonio to be the general manager. It's entirely possible. Who knows? And everything that Pop absorbed from Nelly along the way, being creative, adapting. Pop adapted like crazy over the course of his career. As the game changed, Pop did too. Remember, Pop used to be a dump it down to Tim Duncan as many times as you possibly could whenever he wanted the ball. Turn that into the beautiful game Spurs by the time his career was over. And everything in between, even the Kawhi Leonard years, were a lot of ISO stuff. But Pop adapted and brought in a whole bunch of different coaches with a whole bunch of different experiences and a whole bunch of different schemes and mindsets. He was all about being innovative. And if he didn't feel like he was being particularly creative, he'd bring in somebody who was. And that is absolutely a Don Nelson influence. So, rest in peace, Don Nelson, a truly important figure to the entirety of the game of basketball. The way it's even played today has his fingerprints all over it. Don Nelson, dead at 86. Certainly not forgotten. Alrighty, final segment time. Some odds and ends for the road. I can't run the clips because it's on HBO. I don't want to mess with all that. Don't want to deal with copyright stuff. However, if you are if you're an enjoyer of Hard Knocks, if you have HBO, I'm sure you could just jump on social media. The clips are probably all over the place. I know they are. You can go to Adam Schefter, football guy. He's got the clips on his timeline. on Twitter. But Mitch Johnson and Brian Wright showed up at Seattle Seahawks training camp. The Super Bowl winning team is the subject of Hard Knocks this year. I don't know if that's ever happened. I have no idea. I kind of stopped watching that a long time ago. It used to be better, I feel like. That it's neither here nor there. But Mitch Johnson and Brian Wright showed up to Seahawks training camp. There's a whole segment of them talking to, oh man, y'all are going to have to forgive me. I'm completely blanking on the Seahawks coach's name. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Seattle's head coach. They're talking with him. Mitch is sort of trying to pick his brain about the way they set up camp and the way they talked about culture and brought it to the fore for the team ahead of the season last year. So he was kind of picking his brain, taking some notes on things like that. And then both Brian Wright and Mitch Johnson were asked about Victor Wembanyama. And look, their responses when asked about Victor, they talked a little bit about R.C. Buford finding him when he was 16 or watching him for the first time when he was 16, when Victor was 16, of course, and hadn't even intended to scout him. It was kind of a last-second thing that he ended up watching him play. Said he came back to San Antonio and said, I think I just saw the best player I've ever seen in my life. And I guess the rest is history at that point, but certainly worth your time if you have the ability to access HBO to go check out the clips. The other odd or end, or maybe that was the odd and this is the end, I don't know. The Kawhi Leonard stuff just keeps going. Pablo Torre continues to find out, and it looks like Daktronics, who is a major scoreboard manufacturer. I'm talking like the actual scoreboards in stadiums. You see them across the country, across every major sport. Daktronics is a major manufacturer of those scoreboards, and they are the manufacturer of the sort of if you are at all familiar with Intuit Dome, they have this big halo scoreboard that sort of surrounds the lower level. It's not like your typical big screen Jumbotron type of things that you see in most arenas, like the one you see in Frost Bank Center. This is like this 360 halo that everybody can see from all different angles. It's very cool. It's kind of like, I think as Pablo put it, is like the crown jewel of that brand new arena. But apparently there was some because of course there was more under the table sponsoring, I guess you could say. But that Kawhi Leonard is sort of no-show endorsing another product, this time Daktronics. Daktronics, which has come out and said, again, this is all allegedly, this is all according to Pablo Torre and his ongoing podcast series, Pablo Torre finds out, where he's just exhaustively investigated this whole thing and seemingly has more information than the NBA and Wachtell Lipton and everyone in charge of the formal investigation on everything Kawhi Leonard. Apparently, Pablo is just finding out so much more than any of these other people have. And I'm pretty positive that, I'm not positive, Pablo has said it. The NBA is watching his shows, listening to his podcast. Daktronics, all of these entities that have been involved in this entire story, they're all learning about some of this stuff because of his podcast. And they're certainly, I guess Steve Ballmer is pushing back on it. And I guess Kawhi Leonard is pushing back on it some. But for the most part, the businesses, the companies, they have whistleblowers. And they're not denying this stuff. They're even coming out, former employees of the Clippers, former employees, or even current employees that are speaking under the condition of anonymity are saying, yeah, it was very clearly cap circumnavigation. So, I guess tied to this story is that Jake Fisher, friend of the program, although he's never been on this specific program, we'll get him on at some point. Friend of the program, Jake Fisher, wrote for the Stein Line, Mark Stein's newsletter on Substack, that Kawhi Leonard and his camp fully expect this investigation to be concluded, and that by the time training camp starts, and that their time in Los Angeles with the Clippers is over. Whether or not that means he's going to be in Toronto after the trade that went through at the beginning of free agency that is now on hold What a mess. Whether he ends up in Toronto, who knows? Whether he is leaving the Clippers because his contract got voided or the trade went through, who knows? But basically, Kawhi's time in as a Clipper is probably 99% sure done. But this whole thing is just an absolute mess. And I keep bringing it up, from time to time as new news surfaces, because I know that Spurs fans care about this stuff. And I know that Spurs fans are also sitting out there saying, like, we told you. Look, Uncle Dennis, his whole camp, it's a mess. Also, Kawhi's, like, very strangely, all of a sudden, maybe it's just because he's, an old man now at 35, but he's, like, showing up on social media and showing more personality than he ever has at any point in his career. I don't know if it's like a saving face type of thing. I have no clue. But this whole thing is bizarre. And now we're talking about another sponsorship with a company that doesn't really have any reason to have celebrity endorsers, because it's a business to business type of situation. It's not appealing to the masses. You or I are not going to go buy a giant scoreboard. That's for teams and schools and whatever. So these are not endorsement deals that you typically see. But they did manufacture that beautiful new scoreboard in Intuit. And it certainly sounds like they were paying under the table just to sweeten the pot for Kawhi to choose to choose the Clippers over the Lakers, however you want to look at it, or any other team, whatever, all the way back in 2019. It's just such an unbelievable mess. And again, I'm sure people in San Antonio are like sitting back, crossing their arms. I told you so. This is all weird. Spurs had no chance, man. If this is the kind of stuff that was going on, Spurs had no chance to keep that guy around here for the long haul. Just no chance. Thanks for making Locked On Spurs your first listen, where we cover the San Antonio Spurs every single day. Do us and yourselves a favor, hit that subscribe button so you get notified about every episode, please. You can find me on Twitter at Matthew_Tynan and over at the Corporate Knowledge newsletter. That's MatthewTynan.substack.com for your second listen, by the way. And I'm sure they're talking about the Kawhi stuff. I'm obviously talking about opening day, opening week, Christmas Day, all that stuff over at the Locked On NBA podcast, Locked On NBA on YouTube, Locked On NBA wherever you find your podcasts. Go give those guys and gals a listen and stay up to date. Be the most informed fan in your friend group. All righty. So, again, thank you all for your patience. I'm going to try my best to make it up to you over the next couple of days. But until we speak again, my name is Matthew Tynan, and this is Victor Wembanyama.
Appreciate y'all. See y'all. Never.